Flint Maddox had just walked into the main lecture hall of Pinovari Institute for Interstellar Studies, balancing a steaming cup of synthetic coffee with one hand and adjusting the strap of his tablet bag with the other. The air inside the domed hall shimmered faintly with recycled atmosphere, cool, filtered, and faintly metallic. An enormous lens embedded in the ceiling projected a real-time view of the orbiting moons of Virex 5, the planet where the campus floated above a pale ocean in a constant hover. He took a seat near the rear of the room, giving a polite nod to a few students already seated: 3 Eulorians, a blue-furred Centauri, and one of the new exchange students from the Fravic Collective. The Fravic, a tall, skeletal species with translucent skin and wide, lidless eyes, blinked at him in their own way, which involved a short ripple of color across their shoulders. Flint had learned not to stare. It was week 3 of his cultural exchange semester as the first human student at Pinovari. Most days were lectures on xenocultural diplomacy, comparative ethics, or interspecies conflict resolution. But today was a seminar on crisis response in multispecies environments. Ironically appropriate, though he didn't know it yet. Professor Turin entered, a bulbous-legged Avexian with a voice that sounded like it was being filtered through a mug full of gravel. The lights dimmed as the professor activated the holo display. "Let us begin with a hypothetical," Turin rumbled. "You are on a vessel. There is a sudden sound. You do not know its origin. What is your immediate response?" Flint had just taken a sip from his coffee when a sharp tickle surged through his sinuses. He turned his head instinctively. The sneeze exploded out of him like a thunderclap. "I see ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch." The room froze. The holo display glitched. The Centauri dropped its data pad. The 3 Eulorians leapt from their seats, retractable limbs flaring defensively. The Fravic flung itself behind a bench, pressing a distress button on its chest that let out a high-pitched pulse. Turin's upper right eye twitched. Flint blinked, wiped his nose with his sleeve, and raised a sheepish hand. "Sorry," he said. "It's allergy season. I'm okay." The silence stretched. Turin slowly re-inflated a throat pouch and lowered his arms. "Mr. Maddox, was that a weaponized emission?" "No, sir," Flint said. "Just pollen. From the moss fields near the dorms. I'm allergic." He gestured toward his nose. "It's a human thing." The Fravic student peeked over the bench. "It was a defensive biological discharge?" Flint shook his head. No. My body just overreacts to harmless particles in the air. It's annoying, but not dangerous. Unless I'm holding soup." The Eulorians didn't look convinced. One of them, a female named Vetra, stood stiffly. "Your body triggered a destabilizing concussive response. Without warning." "It was a sneeze," Flint said, trying not to laugh. "Just a sneeze." Professor Turin tapped his interface. "We will pause the seminar while we recalibrate the auditory dampeners. Students, please reset your threat assessments." As the room buzzed with quiet recalibration, Flint rubbed his temples. His first major cultural misunderstanding, and it had come from his own face. After class, Flint was cornered by Vetra and the Fravic student, whose name he'd learned was Colin. They stood in the hallway, blocking his path. "That sneeze," Vetra said, measured above the acceptable decibel range for biological outbursts. "I didn't plan it," Flint replied. "I didn't even know it was coming." Colin tilted his head. "How can a species tolerate such volatility in its own systems?" Flint shrugged. "We just deal with it. Antihistamines help. Sometimes we irrigate our sinuses." "You fill your head with water?" Colin asked, recoiling. "It's more of a rinse," Flint said. Colin turned to Vetra. "We need to escalate this to the Safety Commission." Flint frowned. "Wait, what?" "I sneezed. That's not a safety violation." "It might be," Vetra said. "Spontaneous biological eruptions are prohibited under Clause 17 of the Interspecies Conduct Treaty." "That clause was about venom glands," Flint said. "We covered it last week." Vetra narrowed her eyes. "Intent does not negate risk." Flint sighed. "Look, I'll talk to the campus medic. Maybe get something stronger for the allergies." "But I'm not a danger to anyone." "Pending verification," Vetra said. The next morning, Flint woke up with a sore throat and itchy eyes. The moss pollen had definitely gotten worse overnight. He made his way to the medical dome, where a round creature named Dr. Brull examined him. "You're hosting a minor histamine surge," Brull said, scanning Flint's nasal cavity with a light. "I will prescribe a suppressive compound, but it may not fully control the reaction. Just need to avoid sneezing in class again," Flint muttered. Do not be surprised if you are summoned by the Safety Commission, Brill added. There have been multiple incident reports. Over a sneeze? Flint said. Brill blinked slowly. Over a disruptive, explosive sound accompanied by fluid expulsion and unknown health vectors. Later that day, Flint was summoned officially. The commission building looked like a cross between a courthouse and a lava lamp. Inside, he was led to a chamber where 3 species sat behind a glowing table. Vetra was present, seated to one side. Colin hovered behind her. A projection displayed a slowed-down, audio-amplified version of his sneeze. Flint winced. It did sound a bit like a small explosion. Mr. Maddox, one commissioner said, you have been accused of a Category B spontaneous outburst. How do you plead? Not guilty, Flint said. It was just allergies. I explained that. Vetra tapped a panel. We've compiled witness statements. All agree it was unexpected, loud, and possibly a signal of aggression. You think I was threatening someone with a sneeze? Colin leaned forward. In Fravic culture, such a sound is only made during full combat engagement. I'm not Fravic, Flint said. Which is why we need to assess your species-specific norms, the commissioner said. Can you demonstrate the sneeze again? I can't just do it on command. Then simulate it. Flint looked around. You want me to fake sneeze in front of a tribunal? Yes, the commissioner said. Flint took a breath and gave his best fake sneeze. Chew. Everyone flinched. It was fake. Flint said. You still expelled air at a dangerous velocity, Vetra said. It's just how sneezes work. The tribunal paused. One commissioner turned to another. We may require a multi-species risk audit. Flint left the chamber feeling like he'd been put on trial for breathing. Back at his dorm, he found a notice on his door. Pending further review, you are required to wear a nasal inhibitor during class hours. It was a small device, shaped like a nose clip, that muffled any sneeze to a whisper. It also made him sound like he was speaking through a kazoo. Flint adjusted to it, but the attention didn't fade. Students stared. Some avoided sitting near him. Others asked invasive questions about his immune system. Then, during a group project in bioethics, Flint felt it again, that pressure in his sinuses. He reached for his inhibitor, but it had slipped off during a headset adjustment. He turned, tried to stifle it, but it slipped out. Chaos. A table flipped. A Marnaxi bolted for the emergency exit. Colin ducked under a chair. A security drone burst into the room and locked onto Flint with a tracking beam. Flint put his hands up. It's allergy season. I'm okay. The drone paused. Clarify. Is this a distress signal or a health malfunction? Neither, Flint said. It's pollen. Just pollen. The drone hovered uncertainly, then retreated. That night, Flint sat alone by the lake near campus, watching the twin moons rise. He missed home. He missed air that didn't try to kill him through his nose. But more than that, he missed not being considered a walking biohazard. He heard soft footsteps behind him. It was Colin. I reviewed human physiology charts, Colin said. Sneezes are involuntary. Yeah, Flint said. I told you that. I needed verification. Colin sat beside him. Your species is chaotic. Tell me about it, Flint said. But adaptive, Colin added. What changed your mind? You did not retaliate when we accused you. You submitted to process. You even wore the inhibitor. Flint chuckled. Didn't have much choice. Still, you endured. Flint looked over. So, I'm not getting deported over a sneeze. Colin blinked in that ripple way. Probably not. Flint leaned back. That's progress. It was a full 2 days before Flint dared to take his nasal inhibitor off again. Not because he thought it necessary, he'd triple-checked the allergy meds Dr. Brull gave him and even ordered a scrub filter for his dorm vent, but because the stares hadn't stopped. Whispers followed him in the corridors. Whole clusters of students shifted their bodies subtly when he entered shared spaces, like his presence triggered a low-level gravitational field of discomfort. He kept his head down through most of it, focusing on coursework. The only ones who didn't treat him like a walking hazard warning were Professor Turin, who ignored the whole matter with the indifference of someone who had tenure, and surprisingly, Colin, who'd started trailing him in the afternoons like a quiet, elongated shadow. On the 3rd day after the incident, Flint was in the hydrobotany greenhouse for a mandatory lab. The room was warm and humid, filled with layered trays of alien plants, most of which looked like they'd scream if you touched them wrong. He was adjusting the nutrient drip on a cluster of sponge-leaved Crovala when a voice drifted from the next row. You exude water from your face during sleep. Flint jerked upright and knocked his elbow into a nutrient hose. Colin, I'm gonna need you to stop announcing things like that in public. Colin appeared around the road divider, his long fingers dripping with soil. I reviewed recorded footage of your species' rest cycles. There is moisture loss through pores and ducts. It's sweating, Flint said, reattaching the hose. And yeah, it happens when we're hot. Or stressed. You leak when you are stressed. Most of us do, Flint muttered. It's not a leak. It's thermoregulation. Colin tilted his head. You are designed to malfunction under pressure? No, Flint said. We're designed to keep functioning even when things get uncomfortable. Big difference. A few Eulorians working nearby exchanged glances, clearly eavesdropping. Flint didn't bother lowering his voice. You're telling me none of you ever get clammy? Flush? Overheat? Vetra, trimming a vine that glowed faintly purple, spoke without turning. We regulate through chemical feedback loops, not visible perspiration. Must be nice, Flint said. I'm practically a walking weather report. Colin reached toward one of the Crovala leaves, and Flint slapped his hand away. Don't touch that. It excretes acid when it's startled. Colin stared at the plant, then at Flint. And you work with these while leaking? I wear gloves. That does not negate the risk. Flint sighed and bent back over his tray. Look, if you're here to observe another human oddity, maybe pick something less gross than sweat. I am here because I submitted a reclassification request. Flint blinked. What kind of reclassification? I believe you were miscategorized. You were filed under unstable organic risk vector. I have petitioned for you to be moved to adaptive biological variant. Flint chuckled. Is that supposed to be flattering? It is neutral, but it implies you are not inherently hazardous. Just unpredictable. Flint wiped his forehead with his sleeve. You're really working the PR angle, huh? It is inefficient to keep you under threat observation protocols. It interferes with data acquisition. So I'm a science project now. You were always a science project, Colin said. Now you are a more interesting one. Later that evening, Colin invited Flint to a student demonstration in the Central Dome, a controlled simulation of emergency scenarios in low-atmosphere environments. Flint hesitated, but curiosity won. When they arrived, the dome had been converted into a mock asteroid colony, with stage debris, flickering lights, and a suspended gravity field dialed down to 80%. A student facilitator, a boxy creature with rotating eye clusters, handed Flint a roll card. Untrained civilian. Mild injury. Do not use tools. Do not speak unless spoken to. Flint looked at Colin. I'm being told to shut up and sit down. That is the most accurate role for your species, Colin said. For now. The simulation began. A klaxon blared. A holographic rupture opened in the far wall. Smoke hissed from vents. Alien students scrambled toward designated safety zones, some dragging equipment, others administering mock aid to rubber dummies. Flint leaned against a prop wall, watching. His hand instinctively reached for his inhibitor, still in his pocket. He hadn't needed it all day, but now his throat felt dry. Dust from the simulation fog was irritating his sinuses. He sniffled. A Centauri across the dome paused mid-rescue. Flint closed his eyes. Not now. Another tickle. His nose twitched. He pressed 2 fingers against his upper lip, willing it back. The last thing he needed was another interstellar panic. But the sneeze came anyway, smaller than before, more contained, but enough to echo faintly in the simulation dome. CHF. Silence. Then a Fravic student, eyes wide, dropped their toolkit and bolted toward the quarantine exit. Flint sighed. Seriously. The facilitator turned, antennae twitching. Simulation pause. Containment breach? Colin stepped forward. Not a breach. Environmental reaction. Flint raised a hand. Just a sneeze. Again. The facilitator tapped at his wristband. Should I log this as an emergent threat? No, Colin said. Log it as species-specific involuntary response. There was a pause as the facilitator processed. Does it require medical attention? Only if you count herbal tea, Flint said. The simulation resumed, but a few students kept glancing Flint's way. He stayed out of the mock rescue scenes and hung back until the demonstration ended. Afterward, outside the dome, Vetra approached him. She carried a clipboard and wore a faint sheen of irritation. You disrupted the response pattern. I suppressed it, Flint said. I could have launched a real one. That's not reassuring. I'm doing my best, he said. I took meds, used saline spray, even avoided the moss trails. But the simulation fog got me. Vetra tapped a stylus against her clipboard. Why not request exemption if you are so easily destabilized? Because I'm not fragile, Flint said. I just have a body that reacts to stuff. Doesn't mean I can't function. She studied him for a moment. Perhaps your species' resilience lies not in immunity, but in persistence. I'll take that as a compliment. It was not intended that way. I'll still take it. The following day, Flint was called in for a follow-up with Dr. Brull. The medical dome was quieter this time, and the alien physician seemed more relaxed. I reviewed your allergen panel, Brull said, examining a printout. You are sensitive to no fewer than 16 local particulates, including atmospheric trace from the ocean, kelp blooms. Why am I not surprised? Flint muttered. I am adjusting your prescription. You will receive a daily compound via dermal patch. It should stabilize your responses without inducing sedation. Flint raised an eyebrow. How does it work? Absorption through the epidermis. It interacts with your histamine receptors without disrupting your core temperature regulation. Will it fix the sneezing? It will reduce the frequency, not eliminate the reflex. Good enough, Flint said. I'll take 30. Brull handed him a small case. Apply one patch daily to the upper arm. Rotate placement to avoid dermal fatigue. Flint nodded. Thanks. I'm trying not to be the guy who makes everyone dive under tables. You may never fully succeed at that, Brull said, but you are adapting faster than anticipated. Flint left the dome as evening settled over the campus. The twin moons were rising again, casting long shadows over the hover platforms. He passed a few students in the quad. Some nodded, others avoided eye contact. He didn't mind. Progress was slow, but it was happening. Colin was waiting near the entry arch. We are due for another group assessment tomorrow. You think they'll make me wear a helmet this time? They might, Colin said. But if you sneeze inside it, it could backfire. Flint winced. Let's not test that. You are no longer considered high threat, Colin added. They have begun referring to you as a low-grade atmospheric disruptor. Sounds like a weather pattern. It is an improvement. Flint looked out at the ocean shimmer, the sky painted in pale violet streaks. I guess I'm settling in all right. Colin adjusted the strap on his satchel. You are not yet fully understood. Good, Flint said. I'd hate to run out of surprises. 3 days after the simulation incident, Flint found himself sitting on a low bench inside the campus arboretum, his arm bare where the dermal patch clung just beneath his shoulder. The air was damp with the scent of wet bark and something citrusy from the glowing pod fruits overhead. He tapped his fingers on his knee, keeping a slow rhythm while waiting for the side effects to kick in. Brull had warned him about the first few hours being unpredictable lightheadedness, occasional dry throat, maybe even mild jaw tension. Nothing dangerous, just inconvenient. Across from him, a trio of Hernick students were pruning a vertical growth wall, their many-jointed arms moving with the eerie grace of insects. They hadn't acknowledged him, but they hadn't repositioned themselves further away either. That felt like progress. Colin approached without warning, almost silent on the moss-lined pathway. His robes had been replaced with a practical vest and harness combo, dangling various tools that glinted dully in the arboretum's filtered light. You are not in class, Colin said, stopping just short of the bench. Neither are you. I submitted my assignment early. Colin gestured to the patch on Flint's arm. You are testing the compound. Yeah. Brull said it should level me out. So far, I'm not sneezing, but my tongue feels like it's growing moss. That may be the citrus vapor. It secretes enzymatic fog during pollination. Flint squinted up at the pod fruit trees. You're telling me I'm tasting tree breath? It is possible. Of course it is. Colin sat beside him, folding his long limbs with mechanical precision. You have become less isolated. I think people are just tired of being surprised. I haven't startled anyone all week. That's got to count for something. You re-established baseline predictability. That is more important than popularity. Your people really know how to give compliments that sound like performance reviews. I am not attempting flattery. I know. Colin leaned back against the bench rail, his transparent skin catching the reflection of the tree lights. There is a new proposal circulating through the student council. A multispecies resilience challenge. Participants will demonstrate survival techniques from their homeworlds. Flint raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. You want me to join? You are the only representative of your species. It would be unacceptable to exclude you. I'm not exactly a survivalist. Unless the challenge is getting through a pollen storm with a tissue and a dream. The tasks will be controlled. Simulated stress conditions. No real danger. Flint exhaled. I'm still the guy who set off evacuation protocols with a sneeze. You really think I should be their poster child for resilience? You endured discomfort without retreat. You adapted through medical intervention. You continued to participate despite social scrutiny. That is resilience. Flint didn't answer right away. A buzzing insect the size of a grape drifted past, then dipped into a pod for its open bloom. He watched it vanish completely inside. What kind of survival techniques are we talking about? Colin lifted a small device from his belt and projected a list into the air between them. Flint scanned it. Temperature regulation, nutrient improvisation, manual wound sealing, and something called psychoempathic destabilization resistance. I don't even know what that last one means. It translates poorly. It measures emotional interference under duress. Well, I grew up with 3 siblings and 1 bathroom. I think I qualify. Colin made a note on his interface. I will secure your entry. Wait, that wasn't a yes. You did not say no. Flint groaned. Fine. But if this ends with me duct taping my own leg, I'm blaming you. The resilience challenge took place 2 days later in the old mining basin outside the academic district. The basin had been retrofitted into a controlled terrain dome, with shifting weather cycles and adjustable gravity. The event drew a scattered crowd. Most stood behind the observation barrier, sipping from hydration bulbs or cataloging reactions on their wristbands. Flint stood near the entry platform, adjusting the sleeves on his training suit. The patch on his arm had left a mild redness, but the sneezing had stopped entirely. So far, so good. Vetra appeared beside him, tightening the straps on her gear harness. I assumed you would withdraw. Sorry to disappoint. You're not equipped for most of these conditions. Neither was I equipped for junior high gym class, but I made it through. She gave no response, but her eyes flicked to his patch. Still medicated? Still human. Then may your systems remain contained. Thanks. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. The first challenge was heat endurance. The dome shifted to a desert simulation, dry winds sweeping over the cracked ground. Flint crouched behind a boulder, shielding his face. His suit's inner lining wicked away sweat fast enough, but the sun lamp grid overhead made his scalp itch. Vetra moved with the calm of someone bred for extremes. Colin, hanging back near the perimeter, watched through a thermal monitor. Flint lasted 18 minutes before the dry air triggered a cough. Not a sneeze, thankfully. He drank from his flask and signaled readiness for the next phase. Cold resistance came next. The dome plunged into a deep frost state. Ice formed on the boulders. Breath crystallized midair. Flint's joints stiffened almost immediately. He flexed his hands and kept moving, remembering old advice from Earth survival guides: never sit still, don't wait for the cold to settle in. Other students deployed heat packs or activated suit warmers. Flint did jumping jacks like a lunatic. When the timer buzzed, he collapsed onto a padded bench and peeled off his gloves, fingers tingling. You did not activate your heater, Colin noted. I forgot it had one. Your core temperature dropped by 4 degrees. I've had worse during flu season. The final phase was the wild card, a simulated emergency with random variables. The dome dimmed, alarms blared, and one wall erupted with smoke. Flint was handed a sealed pack labeled Human Emergency Kit and shoved toward the hazard zone. Inside, the floor was uneven. A fake crevasse split the ground. A dummy lay slumped nearby, labeled with a blinking red tag, critical. Flint opened his kit. Inside, gauze, a small thermal blanket, a glucose gel, and a roll of adhesive tape. No instructions. He crawled across the floor, checked the dummy's vitals readout, and started improvising. He wrapped the gauze around the simulated wound, then used the adhesive to secure it. The gel he smeared along the dummy's lips, hoping that counted as nutritional support. The smoke began irritating his throat. He coughed once, held his breath, then ripped a strip of the thermal blanket and tied it around his nose and mouth. He reached the safe zone with 40 seconds left on the clock. Later, as the participants rehydrated and peeled off their gear, the facilitator announced the results. Flint didn't place first, Vetra did, unsurprisingly, but he ranked in the top 5. Colin approached, holding a slim datapad. Your performance exceeded expectations. I'll take that as high praise. You adapted under all 3 conditions. Your physiological irregularities did not impair function. I even made a duct tape mask. I think that should count double. Vetra joined them, brushing frost from her sleeve. You used your emergency materials creatively. That was unexpected. Human tradition, Flint said. We're big on improvising when we forget the manual. You may not be structurally optimal, she said, but you are increasingly difficult to categorize. I like to keep people guessing. A soft chime interrupted them. Colin checked his pad. The campus has updated your classification again. Flint raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. Persistent anomaly. No. You are now listed under resilient variant with moderate volatility. Flint laughed. I'll take it. That's practically poetic. As the sun lamps dimmed and the dome returned to normal atmosphere, Flint looked around at the other students packing up gear, cleaning sweat from faceplates, laughing in mixed languages. No one flinched when he cleared his throat. He turned to Colin. I think I'm finally blending in. You are not. Thanks. But you are being understood. That night, Flint returned to his dorm, peeled off the dermal patch, and stuck a fresh one on his opposite arm. The mirror showed a thin red line from where the adhesive had pressed into his skin. He smiled at it. Adaptation didn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looked like staying upright, remembering to breathe, and making a mask out of a blanket during a fire drill. And that, apparently, was enough.